promoting the free exchange of ideas, questioning the status quo, and having some fun along the way. This is the Are We Idiots Show. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, as mentioned, Richard Kroll and Mark Weaver.
Mark, very appropriate to put me first for today's show since I do know more about this topic than you. And by the way, Hurricane Sally or whatever, Hurricane Trump, whatever it's called. Hurricane Flo.
Flo
Joe is hitting even Pennsylvania today. We're getting buckets of water dropped on us. And shout out to anybody in the Carolinas. I hope they're not underwater.
It's actually not the hurricane hitting us now. It's just this permanent
Is that what it is?
Haze and fog and rain that's been with us for 2 weeks straight. So
I know what it's like to live in Seattle or London.
it's been awful. Hey, folks, friendly reminder, we'd love to hear, like to have more Twitter followers at Are We Idiots Show. And in fact, our Idiots of the Week nominees this week are from our Twitter followers.
Nice.
So 2 Twitter followers sent us proactively, sent us Idiot of the Week nominations, and we'd like to have more of that. So at Are We Idiots Show on Twitter, follow us. We're pretty good about sending tweets out ourselves, so you can be entertained with that. And while you're at it, please share our show on Facebook. And also send us an email suggestions at areweidiots.com. Give us a rating on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. Review us on iTunes. Any other promos to go with?
Just spread the
throwing
word.
it all out there.
Hey, look, my friends and family, just tell 1 or 2 people. Turn them on how to get to us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher. Just spread the word because we need help.
Not afraid to admit it either. All right, the agenda on this week's show, Idiot of the Week, and I have 2 nominees from our listeners. Then we're going to talk about the demise, or not, of football in America. That should be a lively discussion. And then we're going to conclude the show with Kroller ranks all-time football movies. And he's going to do Letterman top 10 style. He's going to have top 12 style.
Top 12.
So we're going to start 12 and go down to number 1. And if you quibble with any of his selections, I encourage you to send us a blast on Twitter or email.
And tell your friends I stink as well.
There we go. All right. So Idiot of the Week nominees, Rich. And since one of the nominees came from my brother, I don't want to be accused of nepotism. So you will be the judge and jury. So the 2 nominees, one from my brother and one from Tom Flynn. And thank you for both of these, by the way. So Tom Flynn's nominee came, it was a screenshot, but it was a Twitter tweet from the, quote, Flat Earth Society. And the message that the Flat Earth Society sent out was, and I quote, "The Flat Earth Society has members all around the globe." And for you listeners out there who don't know the definition of globe is a spherical or rounded object.
That's classic.
So how stupid do you have to be? First of all, you have to be stupid to be in the Flat Earth Society, unless you're Kyrie Irving. I mean, he evidently
No offense.
believes it. But to then send out a message of encouragement.
That is great.
What a marketing machine. All right, so that's nominee number 1. Nominee number 2, and this was submitted by Eric. Mother mistakes dynamite for candle during power outage. I kid you not. Bridgeport, Connecticut. Authorities say a Connecticut woman mistook a stick of dynamite for a candle during a power outage and suffered a severe hand injury. Assistant Bridgeport Fire Chief Michael Calderoni says the woman was looking to light a candle in her home at or about 9:30 p.m. Thursday after the power went out during a storm. The dynamite went off in the woman's hand.
Oh, my goodness.
One of her children called 911, and she was taken to the hospital. No one else was injured. Calderoni said one of the home's windows was also blown
course.
out. Firefighters found another explosive device in the home and, as a precaution, evacuated people in the homes and surrounding residences. The bomb squad was called in to remove it. The woman's name was not released. Darn it.
So, what the heck kind of candles does she use in her house? What did she import? A gross from the Sistine Chapel? Like,
First of all, have you ever seen a stick of dynamite? They're about an inch in diameter. What?
and very solid.
Yeah, and rounded. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what this segment teaches me each week is there's a lot of stupid people. I guess I don't know. What do you think, Rich? What's your commentary?
As my SE Steve Segulio likes to say, you can't fix stupid. So it's classic that somebody with such a ridiculous claim about the Earth being flat then would also use the definition of a globe in their Twitter comment, which is just classic. But I gotta say, someone that mistakes a stick of dynamite for a candle is a different level. Because I just went through this the other night. We had a power outage, and now they make those. Most of the candles are in like glass containers, and they got little tiny wicks, and it's blatant. It could be pitch black. You could be in a coma and know it's a candle. And even normal candles, they're tiny. You put on a birthday cake, whatever the case may be. The old 1 foot candles that haven't been used since the late 1800s before electricity.
The gold rush.
And the gold rush. So she's the winner.
All right. We don't have her name. Maybe you can make a donation to the Bridgeport, Connecticut Fire Department who had to respond.
And her subcontractor that's got to repair the kitchen.
Oh, my goodness. All right. I'll try to compose myself as we move on to the football subject. So we're going to talk about football. As we mentioned at the end of last week's show, it is last week was the first week of pro football. 2 weeks ago was the start of college football. And I think most people, certainly most of our listeners, know that football, college, big-time college, and pro football is by far the most popular sport in America from a viewership perspective. It's also by far the most profitable. And in college realm, the football and basketball programs fund all sports in college. But for pro football, which is the pinnacle, and we'll talk mostly about pro football today, it's been the most popular sport in our lifetime, and probably even prior to that for a little bit. So you're going on 50 years where it's been the most popular sport. Some of the highest rated television shows ever have been Super Bowls. Yada, yada, yada. So we've established it's by far the most popular sport. But ratings are declining. Television ratings for the last, 2.5 years. And there's President Trump, our ignominious leader, has piled on, so to speak, not to use an appropriate metaphor. Has piled on, and it's kind of been a winner for Trump politically. I don't agree with his tactics, but he's obviously struck a chord, and people are tuning out the NFL. So before we go any further on some other reasons that we want to discuss today, what do you think about that subject? The decline in viewership and Trump's propensity to try to make it worse.
Well, this is a subject near and dear to my heart. Love the NFL, love football. It's my favorite sport, followed closely by college basketball. And it's not even I know that the topic of the show was, the demise of football or not. It's not even a question. There is a demise, and there are 3 or 4 major reasons. So
let's talk about the first one with Trump and the decline in viewership. Let's, because I know there's a head trauma thing which I definitely want to get into. But what do you think about that in particular first?
So, one of the things that helped attribute to this is Colin Kaepernick.
Right.
So Colin Kaepernick, for one of his beliefs that African Americans are not being treated fairly by the police, by the government, whatever, decided to take a stance and take a knee during the national anthem. Now, although I think his stance and his cause is very just, very good, I personally believe he's using the wrong forum. The NFL is his employer. The reason he is a multimillionaire or was is because of the NFL. And it's not the right forum to take a political stance that, right or wrong, offends millions and millions of people, anybody that has family in the military or anything, police force, fire, all that stuff, especially the military, right? Most people have interpreted it as a stance against the United States and the flag and our military.
So I agree with you that I wouldn't have chosen that forum, and this is probably not. This show's not going to be about the police brutality or that type of thing. But I would say that it was really Trump who made it about the anthem. It was not before that. It was about the issue, and Trump quite skillfully, by the way, politically turned it into an anthem issue and disgracing the troops. And so that's really how it turned.
But that's how it turned into a big national deal.
Right.
But there were plenty of viewership issues prior to that based on everybody I know, at least our generation and older, views the national anthem as a pretty sacred thing. They view it as our independence, as our country establishing itself, and doing that through all the battles through hundreds of years that we needed to fight and the people that put their lives on the line. And therefore, we sing the national anthem to commemorate how we have our freedom and the freedom to play football and everything else. And that's why it's done before every game.
No. So it won't surprise you to know that I'm a little bit cynical on this issue. So what most people don't realize is the NFL, up until about 15 years ago, never even had the players on the field for the anthem. They purposely started utilizing the military and the anthem for marketing purposes to associate themselves with the military to improve their image. So I'm very skeptical of all of this, and it doesn't have anything to do with my support for the troops. It's a marketing ploy by the NFL and other sports to identify themselves with the troops because people like to support the troops. So, yeah, I support the national anthem. I cover my heart and I stand for it. But, if anyone thinks, and this will lead into this concussion issue later on, if anyone thinks the NFL did it because they're super patriotic, no, it was about money and the reputation.
Well, listen, I'm not disagreeing that it was about money, but the point is there's a lot of places that do the national anthem. Delaware County Christian School does a national anthem.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the point...
Why is it, though, we do the national anthem before a sporting event? I mean, that's a good topic of discussion. What does one have to do with the other?
I don't know that it does, other than putting a stake in the ground that this is going to be a fair game, sportsmanship, and because of our forefathers and the folks that have protected our freedom, we're even able to get together as a community with opposing teams in a warlike fashion, this team against that team, with parents and teachers and family and friends. And it's just become part of a sporting event that I think is kind of a cool way to start it off.
I just don't know what one has to do with the other. But anyhow, let's.
So that's one issue.
Okay.
So that's one viewership issue. People now saying, all right, screw you NFL players, you're anti-America, and we don't like that. That's one issue.
Yeah, and absolutely, I think they've totally misplayed their hand. And, for sure, people are being turned off.
Number 2, I'm going to go through 4.
Oh, yeah, and I got other ones too, but go ahead.
Number 2, rule changes. So NFL and football in general is a very violent sport. One of the reasons why it gained so much popularity in the 60s and 70s was just the sheer violence of it all. The incredible impact and hits, and guys are guys, and testosterone is testosterone. People love that Pittsburgh Steelers, steel curtain defense, and the mean Oakland Raiders, and just all the toughness of football, and the frozen tundra of Green Bay and Minnesota, and the battered hands, and just the warrior mentality that goes back to Roman times, and gladiator times. It's really our modern day closest thing to gladiator events. And now that they're changing the rules, and they've changed a lot of the rules, and I'm not saying the rules are wrong to make it safer, but it's taken some of that, blood and guts, things that men typically loved from football. Now,
I don't agree with that, by the way. We're not agreeing much today. I don't agree with that. I think that it's still an unbelievably violent sport, and these rule changes are only to put off the inevitable demise. That's all they're trying to do. They have this other initiative called the Heads Up thing, where you're trying to teach the young kids to tackle at heads up, but that can't stop the slide, and it can't prevent the repetitive head trauma, which is the real issue here.
you're missing the point as usual when we disagree.
No.
The rule changes are also leading to a lot more penalties, which make these games 30, 40 minutes longer than they need to be. It's a bad disruption. The penalties
Don't
apparently
forget instant replay. I gotta love instant replay.
That's another issue. But what they're doing is now there's, I just watched the game the other day. There was 26 penalties called. It's very boring. Some of them are marginal. Some of them are subjective. Some of them don't even make sense. Some of them, they put the referees in a bad position because here's the rule change. Did that break the rule?
The catch rule is ridiculous.
The catch rule, the helmet rule, in some instances, it's just the rule changes are also impacting the game, making it less violent, and making the games a lot longer and more boring with more breaks. That's the other thing, the commercialization and the monetization. Add all that on top of the stoppage of football in the normal flow of the game anyway. You have all the commercials. There's a commercial before the kickoff, right after the kickoff. There's a commercial right after the punt.
The kickoff sponsored by Toyota.
It's egregiously problematic. So that's another reason. Here's a big one that gets discussed a lot. I'm on 5 or 6 text groups. The incessant celebration after every play. It drives a lot of the traditional viewers crazy. Where before,
You mean the old farts?
maybe the old farts, but the Me Too younger society. Look at me. It's become a narcissistic, soloistic individual performance versus the team. Where second play of the game, a guy makes a
First down.
a first down, and he gets up. He has a big first down celebration, and you're like, dude, you're on the 30-yard line. And then next play, they have to punt or they throw an interception, or the guy makes a sack after he just gave up a 10-yard play, or the guy makes a great hit in the secondary after he just gave up a touchdown. Like, seriously? It's become the game within the game that I hate. I personally hate it, and a lot of my friends do. The game within the game about individual success versus the team. Very often, even after a lot of bad play or a lot of mistakes, or here's a classic, you're down 35-7 in the fourth quarter. The team that's losing by 32 makes a sack, and the guy gets up and does a huge celebration dance. And it's like, look at the scoreboard. Look at the scoreboard. There was a guy, I think Martin Gramatica, a kicker.
Yeah, I remember him.
Made a field goal, jumped up, blew out his knee. I mean, guys are actually getting injured with these celebrations.
I don't really that stuff doesn't really bother me. I mean, I prefer the humble player. The Barry Sanders was the best example of that. Is his dad told him, when you score a touchdown, make it look like you've been there before, and just hand the ball to the ref. So I prefer the humble players too, but the celebrations don't bother me that much. Truthfully,
Well, there's a big difference between making an incredible catch to win the game, or some unbelievable play that's just superhuman. I'm okay with celebrating that. Early in the first quarter, celebrating when you're getting killed, celebrating after you just made a mistake, celebrating your job, like you just made a play that's your job and celebrating it. They know they're all on ESPN Sports Center. Here's the highlights, and I think there's
have
a lot
some
of
context when you celebrate. That's what you want.
context. Now, so here's another big one. And this is maybe where we're leading to with CTE and all the head trauma. There are flat out less players playing football, and there are less affluent society players playing football. And here's where the racial impact of this comes in. And
I wouldn't say it's racial. It's socioeconomic. Let's not make it racial. Let's make it socioeconomic, because I agree with it. Socioeconomic.
The socioeconomic turns into race, and I'll tell you why. So the average middle class or upper class person in America is what? The majority, at least, Caucasian, right?
Well, the majority of everyone's Caucasian, but okay, I got you.
And these folks are now realizing that head trauma is a big deal, and concussions start at an early age, and they're saying, "Son, you're not playing football." They're literally not letting their kids.
Our local high school.
Local high school
had to cancel their season because they didn't have enough kids to field the team.
and they won the championship last year. I was
Right.
just talking to my buddy Anthony D'Addario. He had to switch teams because St. Pius only fielded 12 players,
Right.
which forced his son to go to another school because he doesn't want him playing three ways.
Right.
There are less affluent kids playing football because their parents won't let them.
And I have a theory on how this will manifest itself. And you correct me if I'm wrong. So what's going to happen, and this is Mark Weaver's theory, not proven. What I think will happen ultimately is lawyers will, perpetuate this issue being solved at the lower levels. So if you're a high school, and God forbid, but it's probably going to happen, is that some young kid's going to die. And they're going to do an autopsy, and he's going to have CTE. And pretty soon, lawyers are going to start telling school district, hey, the legal liability of fielding a football team is too much for us to bear. And private schools will probably be first because they're the most exposed. Public schools will be second. And then what will happen is when high school football is the anomaly, then college football, it'll just move up, right? And then college football, it'll happen the same thing in college. And at the end of the day, it'll be the lower socioeconomic groups coming from the last high schools to go down this road. And that's how, and it may not be in our lifetime, it may be 50 years from now, that's how eventually NFL dies. That's my theory.
That's a compounding variable. I agree with you. But here's where it goes back, and you were leading to it a little bit. It's already happening today.
Right.
If you look at the majority of NFL players, they're African American, right? Not to the percentage of NBA, but there's more African American players, and they're coming from inner city, tough cities, tough situations, because it's one of their tickets out.
Right.
So when you have an affluent family saying, "Son, I don't want you playing," and then you have maybe a broken family, not just African American, it could be could be Caucasian, could be Hispanic, whatever. But when you have a broken family,
It's from the island of Samoa. They're high unemployment, but that football is a ticket out of Samoa.
it's the ticket out. So here's the thing, and I've talked to people, I've listened to people. They say, "Hey, I'd rather die at 50 with CTE after having $1 million life, taking care of my family, and getting out of the drug wars and the gangs when I was going to die at 20 anyway. I just bought myself 30 years." So
the problem with that is, as you know, it's the same thing with the parents and that we coach, that we think that our kids are going to be college athletes. It's only a 1% chance or less that your kid's going to be hit that lottery. So it's a really sad thing to be betting on. It's like betting on hitting the lottery to for your retirement.
But the lottery starts earlier with maybe a shot at a scholarship to college where you weren't going to go to college before.
It's still extreme odds, and that's sad that uneducated people would be betting their future on that.
But
the much easier path is studying.
Well, that now you're getting into a whole different tangent here. But here's some examples of Hall of Fame players that have publicly stated they would not let their son play, or they won't let their son play till he's at least a teenager or middle school age, or some of these folks don't even have sons, but if they had a son, they would not let him play football. And you're talking about Troy Aikman. Harry Carson was a linebacker for the Giants, African-American gentleman. Adrian Peterson, Terry Bradshaw, Drew Brees, Kurt Warner, Brett Favre. Even LeBron James, obviously not a football player, said he would not let his sons play football. So
I didn't let my son. He asked me for 3 straight years. There's no way.
That's different. You're a soccer player and you're a little soft.
No, that has nothing to do with that.
I'm talking about NFL Hall of Famers. If it goes to that level,
you don't have to be an NFL player to understand what's going on.
I'm being facetious. Stop being so literal.
I know. I'm just saying, like it's blatantly obvious, and that's what's crazy is these crazed football people who now are the deniers. They're the chief deniers and protectors of the status quo. That's why it made this show, because it ticks me off that these people want to protect their livelihood at the expense of the next generation.
Great segue into my final reason.
Go for it.
just the flat out proof
Money.
of CTE, right? And what does CTE stand for?
Chronic traumatic encephalopathy or something like that. I don't have it in front of me, but that's
Very close.
Pretty close.
Yes, it's chronic traumatic
Encephalopathy.
encephalopathy.
Okay.
Yeah, but we both can't pronounce it, so don't hold us. Now, this is where it also ticks me off. The NFL hid this for decades.
Yep. Yeah, everyone saw the movie Concussion. There's
And-
also another documentary on PBS, pbs.org. It's called The League of Denials. It came out before the movie Concussion. Actually, the doctor was interviewed that was the Concussion movie was based on. So go check that out. It's excellent. And you'll hate the NFL executives when you read that. When you
Absolutely.
see it.
This is as bad as the cigarette conspiracy theory or some of the pharmaceutical where they're hiding things that actually kill people. And for the education of the audience, this started with former NFL player, now deceased, Mike Webster, who was an all-pro center for Pittsburgh. Now, part of the problem was, and here's even more egregious, he was a steroid guy.
Yeah.
And the NFL kind of took a stance at one point saying, well, we don't know about this head trauma stuff. These guys took steroids, which can kill you. They were on amphetamines and other drugs, which can kill you. But the truth is, yes, steroids can give you road rage and lead to all sorts of other things, but you don't know about CTE till you do an autopsy. And Mike Webster, in his final years before his death at age 50, was zapping himself with a taser gun to calm his nerves and try to zap his brain back to function. The famous Dr. Bennett Amalu,
Right. He was in that League of Denials
League
as
of
well.
Denials, he was assigned to this case in September 2002. So this started 16 years ago, and he found that Webster's brain had advanced CTE.
Right.
Had nothing to do, with steroids. Now, here's some other interesting points about this. And this is, to me, one of the main reasons that football is on the decline. When this information is now public, very public, I have to question, if I had a son, would I let him play? My nephew plays. He's a great football player, big kid, 6 foot, 180-pound sophomore at one of the prominent programs in Pennsylvania, Garnet Valley. He just got a concussion 2 weeks, a mild one. And I had to advise my sister, listen, I'd keep him out of practice, make sure you go through there's now even concussion protocol in high schools.
I had to be trained as a coach, just a basketball coach. I had to be trained on the concussion protocol
It's
to
scary.
recognize it.
It's scary stuff. And
It's not just
football.
concussion, though. That's the problem. Is there's a lot of misinformation out there. It doesn't have just to do with concussions. It's the repetitive head trauma, the repetitive head hits that can contribute to CTE, not just concussions. That's a
Agreed.
misinformation campaign. Which, by the way, just like with cigarettes, just like with the food lobby in the United States, just misinformation is their friend because it won't provide any clarity on the issue. And so that's what they did in that for 15 years, the NFL dealt in misinformation to not accept the problem of concussions or CTE.
Well, to your point, it's not just football. I mean, we could expand this conversation. And one of the highest concussion rates in sports is women's soccer.
And lacrosse. Lacrosse is also another big one. So there's all kinds of issues here. There's one other one I want to bring up. So there's cord cutters, right? So the millennials, your favorite generation,
Progressives?
they're not millennials. They're not watching football. They're watching other sports. They're watching esports. They're watching soccer. And in our country, most of the three countries I can talk. The three countries that we get the most immigrants from, Mexico, Cuba, and China, are all preferred soccer countries. So you have another dynamic happening here where the majority of the immigrants coming in come from countries where soccer, or football as they call it, is the preferred sport. So this is another reason why football is in trouble, because the younger generation is not preferring it.
What does it have to do with cutting umbilical cords?
Cord cutting.
Oh, cord cutting.
People
sorry.
don't watch cable. They just
I
watch the
misheard
things
you.
on their devices.
Well, that's a good one. That's one you added to the mix. Thanks for your contribution finally to the show. Here's a little more advanced statistics, updated statistics, I should say, with CTE. Obviously, it can only be diagnosed after death. In 2017, a study of the brains of 111 deceased NFL players, a Boston University researcher found that 110 of them, or basically 99.5%, had the disease. It is no longer debatable whether or not there is a problem in football. There is a problem, the researcher of the study, Dr. Ann McKee, told the New York Times. So is the problem going to hit you in junior high or high school? Maybe not. College? Very possibly. Pro football? Definitely, right? And if you look at what it's led to,
It's very analogous to cigarettes when you think about it.
the longer you smoke, the longer you
Well,
create problems.
And
The longer you get hit in the head, the more you have problems.
Yeah, and it won't affect you to 30 years later, most likely. The misinformation campaigns that existed early on until there was a generation to sample. It's very, very analogous, and I would say almost as deadly.
Well, here's the other problem. Early suicides. So it's
Right.
one thing, you see a lot of these guys, 60, 70, early stage Alzheimer's, forgetting things. They have to write things down. They're sick. They got to sit in dark rooms. They're a real burden on their families. It's awful. But Junior Seau, famous Hall of Fame linebacker, ex-linebacker for the San Diego Chargers, took his own life with a rifle to the chest at age 43.
And he specifically did it to his chest so his brain would be preserved.
Correct.
Right.
So even through it all, he had some smarts behind.
Right.
Andre Waters, our beloved Dirty Waters, Eagles free safety, one of the hardest hitters in the history of football. He took his own life at age 44.
Dave Duerson, bunch of them.
There's a bunch of them. Here's a couple weird ones. Terry Long, former Steelers lineman, killed himself by drinking antifreeze at age 45. So there's an example. He wasn't even in the right frame of mind to take himself out maybe less painfully. That's got to be a crazy way to kill yourself. Here's even a crazier one. This was just a couple years ago. Joe Van Belcher, former KC Chiefs linebacker, fatally shot his girlfriend, then drove to the team headquarters and shot himself in front of coaches and management at age 25. So now, hey guys, this isn't just something hitting us at 50 or after. This can impact you if you've been taking shots to the head since you were a little kid.
Right.
And you get CT in your 20s.
And that's what I think will ultimately happen. It'll happen to a high school kid. They'll do an autopsy. He'll have CTE, and that'll start the lawyers, swarming. So, before we move out onto the final segment, I do want to encourage listeners. It's called a League of Denials. You will hate Roger Goodell. You will hate the doctors that they hired, and that's the struggle I have because I love football too. I mean, I didn't play it, but I love the Eagles. They're my favorite team to watch. And I feel a little dirty, liking football when I know it's not good. Now, obviously, I've chosen not to have my son play, and I'm for individual choice. So people can do this, but I got to believe that, the future generations are not going to view it as soft as I am. I'm looking at it as like, well, it's entertainment. If they want to do it, do it. But I think you could actually have it outlawed in places. There could be laws put into place. I don't know if that ever happens, but I could see it with this litigious society that we have.
Well, the rules are slowly turning it into more of a rugby type of situation for the safety, but it's dramatically changing the game. I do see the demise. The ratings clearly show there's less people watching it. There's less feeder systems. Less families are putting their grade school kids into football. I ultimately see the game declining. I don't know if it'll ever go away 100%, but
the best athletes will go elsewhere. We know that.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So we're going to conclude the show with a great segment. There's lots of great football movies out there over the course of the last 50 or 60 or even 70 years. And you could argue for a lot of them, but Rich is going to have the definitive countdown on the top 12 football movies of all time. We got about 3 or 4 minutes, Rich, so let her roll.
Just so everyone knows, this is the correct list.
Yeah, it is.
So you could argue with me, but
no, we all know it's right.
I went through this. This list is right. All right, let me start with number 12. We Are Marshall, 2006.
I love it.
Great story, heartwarming story. Tragic story how the Marshall football team died in a plane crash and how the program came back.
Matthew McConaughey, right?
Matthew McConaughey, who I think is one of the worst actors of all time, actually does a really good job in this movie.
Hey there, hi there, hello there.
So, number 12. Number 11, dear to our hearts, close to home, Invincible, 2006.
Nah, I'm not. I didn't make my top 12.
Here's why it's a great story. The fact that Dick Vermeil had this open tryouts for any idiot in Philadelphia, and Vince Papale, who hadn't played football in 10 years,
I get it.
makes the team.
I
Mark
get it.
Wahlberg was a bad casting.
I think you're a little homerism there on that
There
one.
is, and Mark Wahlberg is. Vince Papale was 6'4", Italian guy.
Wahlberg's like 5'11" or something, 5'10".
Less 5'9", thick Boston guy. That didn't make sense to me. Number 10, Varsity Blues, 1999. James Van Der Beek.
Good choice.
Really well depicted the struggles, the popularity of high school football, the struggles of adolescence. Good movie. Number 9, Any Given Sunday, 1999. Al Pacino, Jamie Foxx. Classic movie. Al Pacino does a pretty good
There
job.
wasn't any
of-
cursing in that movie, was there?
None at all. I think they said poop and darn maybe once or twice. Al Pacino does a pretty good job of playing a tough NFL coach, Jamie Foxx, the quarterback. There is some cheesy speeches by Al Pacino that were definitely exaggerated.
He played Paterno, by the way, too.
And I heard that didn't make my list.
Yeah,
but
that was a documentary kind of thing.
The Blind Side, 2009, actually won awards. This was
One of my
Sandra
wife's
Bullock.
favorites.
Really?
Yes.
So for those who don't know, this is about the homeless teenager Michael Oher, who was adopted by a white family, taken in, encouraged to play football, becomes an All-American at Ole Miss, and then offensive tackle for the Ravens, part of the 2012 Super Bowl. The problem why I didn't make this higher, Michael Oher himself said the movie hurt his career.
Yeah. And Tim McGraw's acting debut, by the way, which
I
is
didn't
kind of
know that.
interesting.
All right, what are we on? Number 8, Friday Night Lights, 2004.
Nah, not mine.
Billy Bob Thornton.
I don't like Billy Bob. He creeps me out. I'm not saying he's not a good actor, but he creeps me out. That guy's a weird dude.
He did a decent job of a coaching. Probably football's nowhere bigger than it is Texas high schools,
Right.
and that's what this was about. And that led to a TV series,
Right.
very popular TV series. Jerry Maguire, 1996. Tom Cruise, Cuba Gooding.
Oh, yeah.
Show Me the Money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Classic movie. One some of our listeners may not know of, unless they're as old as us. North Dallas 40, 1979.
Chris Christopherson, right?
Chris Christopherson, Nick Nolte. Some people say it's the most accurate depiction of football culture, the locker room. It was based loosely on the Dallas Cowboys. I think it was probably more appropriate if it was based on the Oakland Raiders. Remember the Titans, 2000.
Oh, I love that movie.
Denzel Washington.
Love
True
that
story about a all-white high school and all-black high school integrating,
Right.
going
In
through
Virginia.
some incredible challenges, and ultimately winning the state championship in Alexandria, Virginia, 1971. Great movie. I'd argue I could even move that one up higher on my list. Brian's Song.
Everyone cried. Everyone cried. It's impossible. It's like Old Yeller.
It's
Yeah,
impossible. It's just like Old Yeller. Now, the irony is this is the only TV movie on the list. 1971, Billy D. Williams and James Caan play Gal Sayers and Brian Piccolo. True story. They were interracial friends. Gail Sayers from Kansas, Brian Piccolo from Wake Forest. Brian Piccolo dies of cancer in his 20s. Gut-wrenching true story. Number 3. Actually, I'm down to number 2 already. Right. The Longest Yard, 1974.
Burt Reynolds. May he rest in peace. He just died this past week.
What a great movie. Classic.
Awesome movie.
That was arguably...
And by the way, not the remake with Adam Sandler, which was awful.
Horrific.
It ruined it for me.
It was like the remake of Caddyshack, 1 and 2, night and day. Awful. That also could have been my number 1, but I'm going to go with my number 1.
Dun, 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 dun.
Rudy, 1993.
Everyone thinks that's number 1. I have never seen it.
Why did you admit that in front of me?
I just can't believe I've never seen it. But I have a problem. Before we run out of time, all the right moves. Tom Cruise. That's got to be top 5. You don't even have in your top 12. All the right moves. Tom Cruise, Aliquippa. I mean, come on. That's got to be top 5.
You know what?
Did you forget that one?
Pittsburgh High School.
Oh.
All right, guys. I'm making an edit. I'm inserting all the
right
moves.
Because I agree. I've heard Rudy is unbelievable. I got to see it.
I agree with you. I love that movie.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that in my top 5. Real quick for those, I just want to clarify some misnomers about Rudy. First of all, his name was Daniel Rudiger, nicknamed Rudy. He played for Notre Dame on the practice squad, 74 to 76 under Ara Parseghian. Ara Parseghian left Dan Devine came in. The movie depicts Dan Devine as a jerk who didn't even want to play Rudy in that last game, but it was actually Dan Devine's idea to let Rudy Suit play in his last game after getting his butt kicked on the practice squad for 3 years. And Rudy gets in on the final series. He was on the kickoff. First down was a incomplete pass. Second down, Rudy sacked the quarterback. Time expires, and they do carry him off the field.
I got to say it. I've seen the clip of them being carried off the field, but I've never seen the full movie. So that's on my to-do list.
Good call with all the right moves. My apologies for forgetting that.
But other than that, it was the definitive list. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
There's no arguments at all. And by the way, Tom Cruise made 2 of the top 13.
Yes, he did. All right, folks, I hope you had some fun with that. I know I did. Tune in next week when we dissect the term fake news. And by the way, this was also suggested by one of our listeners. And we're going to look at its ramifications in our daily life. It's a new term. We haven't heard it until the last election cycle. And it should be interesting. I'm sure, as I mentioned earlier, our ignominious leader will come up.
That's twice you used that word.
Yeah, I like it. It's embarrassing. That's the name. That's what it means.
You can't even spell it.
As always, please remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See you all next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Are We Idiots Show. Please subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher so you can enjoy all episodes.
True love won't say goodbye. True love won't say goodbye. True